My friends, look at this map. Do you notice it? You don't? Well, I think nobody does, because it's so tiny, but it's so big. Let's zoom into it. And this small dot right here on the border of Belarus and Poland, we'll zoom into it. And which side of the border is this dot? It's on the Polish side. And it's a village of Krótki, this small settlement right here. Why is this such a big deal now? Because Belarusian helicopters, two of them actually, crossed into NATO airspace. One of them was an attack helicopter, one of them was a transport helicopter. They flew 3 kilometers into NATO airspace, into Polish airspace, and back again. Like Bilbo Baggins said, there and back again. As you can see, this is the Belarusian-Polish border, and the helicopters decided to go there and back again with this fun little arch they made, violating international airspace and NATO airspace. I mean, NATO is holding Poland back. They're getting full ready for this. On this footage, you can see how Poland is sending now, in response to this airspace violation, 200 pieces of additional equipment to the border. Belarus does not want this. Here are the photos of the helicopters made by the Krótki villages, and there's a fun story with it. These helicopters were flying because of a Belarusian military exercise they were doing. Belarus let Poland know in advance that they were doing this military exercise. Of course, they didn't let them know that they're going to violate Polish airspace, but they did. And at the very same day that the airspace was violated, the Polish Ministry of Defense released a statement that no airspace violations happened because they didn't recognize the choppers, because they were flying incredibly low over the treetops. The radars didn't pick them up. Who did pick them up were the villagers of Krótki. These photos you're seeing right now are made by the villagers with their phones. You know, Polish villagers are better radars than the radars themselves. Better send Polish villagers to Ukraine. They will detect any Ka-52 alligator. Now, the photo you see here is an updated Polish Ministry of Defense report that states that yes, Mi-8 and Mi-24 Belarusian helicopters did breach the NATO airspace because they had to retract their previous statements, because the villagers noticed the helicopters before the radars did. Evidence coming online was too overwhelming, so the Ministry of Defense had to reissue the statement that yes, the border was violated. But it's all about the villagers and their sharp eyes. Poland intends to create a new engineering battalion to the border with Belarus. It will be equipped with the new Polish Baobab K mining systems. Not mining as in you're mining something out of the ground, mining as in laying mines. If that wasn't clear. That system is capable of creating a minefield 2 kilometers long and up to 100 meters deep in only 22 minutes. It's a beast. Half an hour and an entire vast ground in front of you is fully mined. It is a beast. It's a Terminator. Now the next sentence is tricky. I gotta read it to you. The battalion will be subordinate to the 15th Mechanized Brigade of the 16th Mechanized Division of the Polish Army. These numbers get me sometimes. But the border violations and the Wagner deployments near the Suwalki Gap are not the only thing that Belarus has been using to increase tensions with Poland. They have been using immigration as a weapon for almost a year. I think it's over a year now, against Lithuania and Poland. What Belarus has been doing is, because Russia through Wagner has a very huge presence in Syria, they have been tricking Syrian people into coming to Belarus, saying that they will be accepted into the European Union. Well, in reality they are not. What Belarus does to these people is just leave them, dump them on no man's ground in between the Belarusian fence and in between the Polish fence. And then they point guns at them saying, go to the European Union, go, there's Poland. You can get to Germany through Poland. In reality, Poland is fighting fiercely to protect their borders and has to keep huge amount of border guards stationed all the time. The Belarusians are not letting the immigrants back in, so after a few weeks they will turn violent because they're hungry, without food or medicine, and they need to go somewhere. And this creates a huge border pressure for Poland. So these provocations from Russian, Belarusian side are not a coincidence. It's a pattern and they are being escalated. As we can see in this photo, it is the reality. Poland is the bad, mad dog of NATO. You don't want to mess with them. I guess Lukashenko and Putin are delusional about the strength of the Polish military, because Poland has an insanely strong military compared to Belarus. Even compared to Russia, they have an insanely strong military. Poland could wipe the ground with Belarus, no questions asked. They wouldn't even take losses. Against Russia, they could definitely hold their ground. So if Putin and Lukashenko would be a little bit more smart, they would back off now. You don't want to let Poland out of the cage. Now I will read a tweet from my favorite Anton Gerashenko. I use his information a lot because he thinks like I do. I like the way he presents things. Lukashenko mentioned recently that Wagnerites wanted to go on a tour to Warsaw. Following that, Belarus pro-government experts and propagandists started to make direct statements about the possibility of Wagner sabotage in Poland. Well, look at this. This is Belarus, this is Ukraine, this is Lithuania, this is Poland, and this here is Russia, the Kaliningrad Oblast, and this little gap right here is the Suwalki gap, because the Suwalki settlement is right here. This is what's about 80 kilometers wide, and it's the only thing that connects the Baltic states physically with a land corridor to the other NATO states in mid-Europe. So the fear is that Wagner troops will occupy this Suwalki gap, and this is what people in America are saying, people in Southern Europe are saying, oh, it's such a small gap. Well, have you seen the Polish military? There will be no occupation of this Suwalki gap. Poland will occupy Belarus. This is what they should be afraid of. Is there a probability that Poles are preparing attacks on Belarus? In my opinion, there isn't. Of course not. No, they're not the winged hussars who are aggressive outside of their country right now, but they're incredibly aggressive on defense. In any case, if any kind of bigger provocation happens on the Belarusian or Russian side, these might be the outcomes, and I'll lie them for you here. NATO will see this as an attack on its territory and will issue an ultimatum with a threat of war. I see actually Russia doing that before NATO. NATO has not been known for their ultimatums. That's more like Russia. Empty ultimatums for Russia. Putin may also issue the same ultimatum accusing NATO countries of preparing for an attack on Belarus. In other words, the world will be on the verge of World War III. However, due to the obvious fact that it is provoked by Russia, the West can convince China, India, Turkey and other countries to organize a total economic and military blockade of the Russian Federation, and Putin will either have to go for a nuclear strike with guaranteed destruction of Russia itself afterwards, or back off in this case. Now, I don't see China and India moving away from Russia economically anytime soon. They will play both worlds as long as they can. It is very likely that in response to a sabotage by Wagner PMC, the West will lift the ban on the use of their weapons on Russian territory. I mean, NATO is going soft with Russia right now. They're sending 1 to 3% of their overall capabilities in numbers to Ukraine. If this would happen, if NATO's border would knowingly be violated by Wagnerite troops, NATO would take the gloves off and there would be nothing left of Russia and Belarus. And now, to end this topic with a little bit of humor, I know you all need it and it sums the topic up perfectly. Let's watch a video together and you want to see it, believe me.
We are just doing military exercise. And so are we. What you talk about? You do training along my border, I do training along my border. It's good time. You Polish should be more respectful of the land that Joseph Stalin gave you.
It's very in the topic because Putin recently actually made an interview, or in a video he stated that Poland is nothing but a gift from Stalin, which is utterly a lie. Stalin did not like the Poles. Like Hitler, they both kind of hated the Poles, and Poland as a country lost 25% of their population in World War II because they were invaded by the Soviets and by the Germans. None of the dictators liked them. So this Putin statement, I mean, he's making the entire nation of Poland his personal enemy, a big mistake. Let's not forget about the winged hussars and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth that defeated Russia.
Since you're such a big fan of history, have you seen the map of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth?
Yes,
here,
please.
I have the map around here somewhere. Please show it to the vodka-flavored dipshit.
Yep.
Did you look at that?
It's huge. Half of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Kaliningrad Oblast, Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, almost also the Moscow Principality. I mean, this was a country, the biggest country at the time in Europe.
Part of Russia is supposed to be mine. If you cross into Belarus or Russia, it will be seen as an act of war. It's a two-way street. You cross into my territory, it's the same. Just remember, Wagner is a private military group and not part of the Russian Federation. Therefore, not Russian. Of this I know. I would discourage them from crossing into Poland, because there will be no survivors. I will make the Battle of Conical Fields look like a fucking tea party. Are you crying? I am just so unbelievably proud of him.
Yeah, honestly, USA is mostly keeping up the NATO strength in Europe because the Central European countries have been getting very soft. They're changing their ways now, but USA has been doing it. Now you are seeing Poland actually pick up the pace, increase the military spending and stand up for themselves. I mean, Estonia is also over 3%, I think, military spending GDP. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Estonia is one of the highest percentages in Europe with military spending of the GDP. Poland is also with us, and then there's the US. The rest, like Germany, France, these countries, the percentages are mind-blowingly low. They should be higher. 2.1 is the NATO standards. I think most of the countries are below that. I can understand why US is proud of Poland. My friends, do you notice this? Yes, we're on Crimea. Do you notice the little dot? Well, I will zoom into it for you. This is the city of Simferopol, but we go north from the city. And what is this? Oh, Gvardiiske settlement, and right next to it to the west is the Russian military airbase. Let's zoom into it. Ooh, do we find any juicy targets? Oh, wow, what are those? Be a shame if anything happened to them. Be a shame if Ukraine struck the base with such groupings of Russian airplanes. Well, they did. Last night they did. Explosions happened in this airbase and I'm sure at least something got hit because Ukrainians are not known to miss. This base is home for the 37th Mixed Aviation Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces, actually the Russian Air Force, and it got struck. I cannot say if it was Storm Shadow or some Ukrainian-made drones, but it doesn't really matter. Somebody was smoking carelessly on this airfield close to this cluster of Russian aviation assets. Be a shame if anything happened to them. Be a shame if they spontaneously combusted or something. And now, my friends, the time you've been waiting for, the Russian losses of the past 24 hours, 2nd of August 2023. 540 liquidated Russian personnel, and after the losses we'll go through why is it a little bit higher, because we have a very juicy HIMARS attack on a very juicy target. Only 1 tank and 8 armored personnel vehicles, which shows that Russians in the past 24 hours were not conducting any offensive operations anywhere. Otherwise, these numbers are always higher. 27 artillery systems. This is not connected to if Russians defend or attack, because Ukrainians are just targeting any Russian artillery they can find. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 15 UAVs, because there was an UAV attack like every night on Ukrainian cities, 25 vehicles and fuel tanks, and no special equipment and no warships. I mean, I'm dreaming of the day when I see this number 1 pop in here again, warships. I want to see a big kaboom. And now, my friends, the last zoom in of this video before some other news. We zoom into Mariupol, yes, because this city, this grand achievement of the Russian army, because they lost a lot of troops taking this city, well, it was visited by Storm Shadow, and some Russians are now sleeping with the fishes. We don't know what was targeted. We only have local Russian reports, but the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that a Storm Shadow missile was shot down. In reality, no Storm Shadow missiles have been ever shot down yet, and it hit something very dear to the Russian armed forces in Mariupol. Mariupol is home to most of the Russian rear guard in the entire Southern Army grouping, so there's a lot of targets in this city. My friends, now we'll watch a video that came out a few days ago, translated by Dimitri, and why I want to bring this older video into it, because we have now information that Russian young men have decided to smoke extremely carelessly next to Russian enlistment officers once again. If you don't know what it means, then yes, they're burning them to the ground. Why now? Well, we get an answer from this video. A heated discussion has been going on this week. This is completely normal to discuss this in Duma. Duma is the Russian parliament. Federation Council, civil organizations, media, internet, and so on. When it comes to the law, obviously nothing changes. Conscription starts at 18 years old and it will continue starting at 18 years old. Length of service of 1 year stays the same. Those who have benefits and postponements of the service, none of that is cancelled. The only thing changing is the time frame. It was from 18 to 27 years and now it gets juicy, which tells us more information than this video. Now it will be from 18 to 30 years. So they lengthened the conscription years by 3 years, meaning if you are 28, you will still be asked to join the army. By 28, you might have children, a woman, a mortgage, and you gotta still go to the army with 18-year-old high school boys for 1 year to build fundaments or houses for oligarchs. That's what they do in the Russian army. Or to be sent to Ukraine, and that's the more likely reason. Russia would not change this law if they would have enough cannon fodder. This gives them not tens of thousands, this gives them hundreds of thousands of new cannon fodder that by law they can force to go to fight in Ukraine. Because Russia is using their conscripts in Ukraine and nobody's doing nothing about it in Russia. This is the new normalcy there. They say, of course, that they don't. Well, these new a few 100,000 Russian conscripts, 27 to 30, a working male population that is just setting their life in order to be sent to die in Ukraine. Unfortunately, yes, it gives Russia the much needed manpower that they have been losing 500 at the time for the last, year. I cannot say that this will not have an effect on the battlefield, and I hate to say it, but this is a problem for Ukraine, a huge problem. I think this is an additional opportunity for conscripts. Oh, please. If a person wants to serve in the army but is unable due to living conditions, studying or something else, we're extending the opportunity to realize their constitutional requirement to serve in the army and the constitutional requirement to die for your Tsar. Yes, in the Russian army, I have talked to Russian conscripts who have graduated or finished the conscription. They shoot their weapons about 2 to 3 times for the entire conscription. Mostly what they do is logistical work. They dig roads, they work for Russian oligarchs, building them houses for free. They work on cities' infrastructure projects. They're being used as free work labor, not as slaves, but mostly as serfs, because they will be paid very, very minimum, and they will be kept in barracks so they cannot leave. And they have to work for the state, kind of a serf, almost nothing connected to the military. In this case, yes, they will do all of these tasks also, but they will also die in Ukraine, which is the new requirement for the Russian conscript. So I feel bad for these Russian men, and I feel bad for Ukraine, because it will affect Ukrainian counteroffensive. And connected to this, of course, we have a reaction from the Russian society. Unfortunately, they don't react like the French, although they should. The French, who kinda invented democracy, or similar system to it, they don't like the change of baguette price. They're already on the streets changing the government. When Russians are sent to die in Ukraine when they're 30, this is what they do. They just take Molotov cocktail from babushka's bag. And you see the man taking it out of his mother or grandmother's bag and throwing it at the enlistment office. It's one way to solve the problem. Unfortunately, I know this activity will die out in a week because I've seen it many times before. If this activity would go on for a year, 2 years, and would be done on a large scale, then it would have actual effect. But unfortunately, I'm here to disappoint you. This is an isolated event. Only 20 has been set up plays across Russia, but Russia has about 10,000 enlistment officers, so a very small number, unfortunately. My friends, I still have another great zoom in for you, because this time it's HIMARS, a very juicy HIMARS target that actually showed itself in the liquidated Russian personnel. This peninsula is called the Yaroslav, and I'll zoom out for you. It's northern Crimea or southern Kherson Oblast actually. And if we zoom in, we see this very narrow land corridor connecting this Yaroslav peninsula with the southern Crimea landmass. And if I zoom into it, it's mostly a beach with some trees, you know. This is how it looks like from the Ukrainian drone view. Trees, beaches, you know, a paradise to sunbathe. And this is the footage. Looks pretty. And Russian troops have decided to make a little beach party on this land corridor. You see, there's a whole company present here. They're chilling, vibing, hanging around, training themselves to stand and talk and drink vodka or whatever they do in the Russian army. As you can see, more of them all over the place. Ukrainian drone was hovering and just recording their activity, and of course calling their good friend HIMARS to pay a visit. Here we can see another cluster of Russian troops. I mean, there was probably several companies. I saw up to 5 trucks, and by the looks of the troops, I mean 2 to 3 companies clustered together, because Russians are a communal people. Estonians are individualists. Americans are individualists. Russians are very communal people because of their Soviet past, and also before that it's part of their culture. So we can see them practicing this community right here on the beach. You can see these little smoke puffs. These are already a sign of visit from Saint HIMARS. I will go frame by frame, and boom, this is a HIMARS rocket right here going down on this area. It's a marvelous kaboom on the cluster of Russians practicing community and, I don't know, communism or whatever they want to practice together there. And there we get these extra 40 Russian liquidated personnel. My friends, now is the most juiciest part of the video that you have been waiting for, and if you're a new viewer and a new patron, you will hear your name butchered in the most gruesome way possible. I'll read you 5 new Patreons, tier 10 or above. HG. That's it. Hombre Blanco, Tom Skinner, Patrushkin. Patrushkin, isn't that like the... Patrushkin is a Russian top brass politician, so I don't know why I'm being supported by a Kremlin politician, but thank you. Timothy Maken, well, I've seen your name several times. You're signing and signing on again. Thank you, my friend, very much for the continuous support. If you like my channel, the Patreon link is in the description below. Also, my friends, I'd guide you to my Twitter account. 3 times a day, you get the most important news about Russia-Ukrainian war in the most compact form possible. Also, videos and photos of the events that happened. For example, smoking carelessly. Also, check out my Instagram. Check out my trip to Venice up on my Instagram, or in September I'm going to Ukraine to deliver trucks for the Special Forces units, 3 units, and all of that trips will be in my Instagram, links in the description below. Until my next video, my friends, Slava Ukraini.